All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Coretek's webinar, Nerdio and the True ROI. You're going to have Ryan and Josh, Coretek architects, and then Greg Roberson from Nerdio take you through a presentation today. And then right at the end, we'll have Q&A, so you're able to drop that directly into the chat. So I will hand it off to Ryan.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, or I should say good afternoon to our East Coast guests. If you're on the West Coast, good morning to you. My name is Ryan Hinkleman. I'm a Principal Solution Architect here at Coretek Services. Have been doing EUC, been on the EUC journey for most of my career. I have with me Josh Ostlund, Principal Architect here at Coretek as well. Josh, you want to introduce yourself very quickly?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Josh Ostlund, Principal Architect at Coretek Services, as well as Ryan. Been doing EUC for a better part of the last decade, maybe a little bit more, and primarily focusing on the ins and outs of cloud computing, going along with that from an Azure perspective.
And Greg from Nerdio.
Greg Roberson with Nerdio. Been around Nerdio for about 2 years and helping customers with AVD and deployments.
Awesome. Thank you. Slide forward here. Perfect. So today we're going to talk about Nerdio and the True ROI. So obviously there's going to be some heavy discussions around Azure consumption and costing. But I thought we might back up and start and talk through quickly some of our approaches to the use case, which have fundamental implications on not only the user, but then some of the consumption and costing in Azure. We'll talk about how we look at cost management for VDI specifically and AVD. We're going to do a scaling and cost ROI example. We'll walk through a sample scenario with 3 permutations and kind of demonstrate some of the values of some of the scaling components and the impacts that they have. Greg is going to walk us through some of the details of the scaling components, specifically in Nerdio, as well as some of the other feature sets and some of the capabilities that are inherent and exclusive to that platform. And then I think we'll widen out the discussion a little bit and talk to kind of what we are wrapping around from a value perspective, not only with Nerdio's value into the overall EUC platform, but how we're approaching it from a Coretek perspective to continue to drive additional value for our customers. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So kind of getting launched off here, our best practices, and it really begins holistically with the user. They're truly at the center of all successful deployments. This has been true really since our roots in some of the healthcare deployments we did around providing electronic medical records. Transactional, quick, efficient actions within the workspace was essential to really doing that efficiently and helping those physicians and nurses provide care. And that's something that we were quick to focus on, eliminating extra clicks, making sure applications worked with all the due speed, etc. And then doing so at a cost that was manageable to all. And the other piece of that then is those applications, because they really will dictate the requirements for your users and your use cases. Even 2 users with the same application could be using them different ways and create different usage. So that's truly fundamental in understanding what those are and the methodologies that you may support and deploy them. And we'll talk through some of our rationale for what those are. Josh, you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, one of our leading practices is leading off with a multi-session, non-persistent, optimal workflow for an end user as our most cost-effective model. So leading into more user density and ultimately providing exceptional performance on the VMs leads to, one, a happy user experience, and two, the most cost-effective environment on us as consultants and engineers, right? So getting into essentially bullet 2 here, we do development and of business personas for the best fit of the use case to really define the criteria here that you would see at the bottom of the screen, from a pooled multi-session to a pooled dedicated to a dedicated persistent model, based on a business persona for the end user to be able to essentially complete their job based on the application provided to them in that working methodology. And for example, moving into bullet point 3 here, if we're working on a streamlined developer / highly intensive graphical workload, holistically, that has traditionally put us into a dedicated persistent VM model. And leveraging Nerdio, we have become comfortable deploying that in a pooled, dedicated fashion to optimize cost and really give some savings back to the business. So that way they can still provide the same level of framework for a highly intensive workload at a reduced cost model and truly benefit from the economies of scale brought to you by cloud computing.
So Josh, maybe we'll talk about what those components of cost are in Azure.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to remember that fundamentally, the most expensive resource that would be deployed in this VDI scenario would be the compute of the VMs. It's not the only cost associated with cloud computing, but the compute of the VM SKU and the models identified are going to be where you're going to see about 70% of the run rate in your Azure environment for this environment. OS disks and storage for FS Logics come in pretty close as ancillary pieces. And then subsequently, you have some networking traffic and the like to be able to get in the environment, transit VNets and things of that nature. But ultimately, our focus is around reducing the cost of the compute spend.
Thanks, Josh. So I think one of the things we want to talk about when we talk about return on investment is really offsetting some of those costs of consumption with value that Nerdio provides. And so really wanted to create a really focused example today, because as you mentioned, there's all different types of use cases from multi-session to dedicated and all different scenarios of which Nerdio provides value to all of them. But we really need to pick one to really make this simple and drive to that financial performance as well as the user-based performance. So in this scenario, we're going to focus on that biggest slice of the pie, the compute, and we're just going to do a simple head-to-head in some common usage scenarios for what is the same net load. We're going to use a multi-session Windows 11. We'll use a D8S V5 in East US 2, and we'll get about 10 users per VM. And the first scenario, we're going to say, hey, not only are we just going to use we're going to use RIs because we feel like that's the minimal cost optimization we can do versus just doing a pay-go. Scenario 2, we'll use an Azure scaling plan. And scenario 3, we'll use a non-persistent advanced scaling from Nerdio. And we'll quickly highlight some of the principles around this. So in our scenario 1, I think one of the things here that we'll set foundationally is we have a demand. This is the time as you move through, say, a typical business day. And you're going to have, in this case, you're going to see something that's maybe more, knowledge worker oriented, where you have more of a 9-to-5 shift. I myself am slanted. I'm a morning guy, so you can see the spike goes up in the morning because, fairly early in the morning, because I figure everybody's like me, right? But the gray area is really the provision capacity. In this case, we've said, turn on all of our VMs to meet my need and leave them on. And yes, use them as RIs, but you can see all that gray area is excess consumption that I really don't need and that I'm paying for as compared to my demands. I'm still using the hybrid rights that are available to me via AVD, which is great. I still am getting some savings from those reserved instances, but if I can really shrink down that excess, I stand to make some savings pretty quickly. So let's look at the tools we can use to do that. Azure Scaling Plan is one of them. And the key to take away here is we've obviously shrunk the schedule pretty significantly, and the amount of gray area, the consumption that we have that's over and above our demand has dropped pretty drastically. We do have a schedule-based scaling, in which case at about 6 a.m., again, the early birds get the worm. They're coming online and we're provisioning that scale out and we're scaling it to the full expected load. And we're leaving that on for a good portion of our day. And then as users come off the machine with the day as it allows, we'll shrink down that number of VMs and ultimately shrink that down. That does have some lag based on a number of factors, such as how the users utilize it, what we allow for them to have from, say, an idle time perspective, et cetera, and how quickly we can drain the number of machines. In this case, we have about 10 machines, 10 users per machine. If we have 1 or 2 on each, it may be hard to shrink that individual machine because we need to push them down. So again, we've moved pretty considerably towards a savings here, but what if we can do this a little bit more advanced? And this is really, you get closer and closer to this as you use something like Nerdio. So in this case, in this scenario, we're using Nerdio to do that, and we're getting far closer to our actual demand. And it's because we have demand-based scalings, we have multiple pre-stage schedules, we have some predictive analytics in there, we have some scaling that can be done based on numerous factors such as CPU, RAM, memory, session numbers, et cetera, that'll allow us to very much more granularly match what we see from a demand perspective. And that has some pretty dramatic implications on some finance. So to get to that and the finance and the ROI, again, I think bottom left center of your screen there, you can see unoptimized is $2,400, meaning if we had just turned all those 10 machines on and not even bothered to make them reserved instances, this scenario would cost us about $2,400 and change per month. We did turn them on because we're at least a little responsible, and we're still at $1,833 a month in our first scenario. In scenario 2, we've said we want to scale. We brought that down very drastically to just under $1,400 per month. For, again, this is just focused on the compute. Scenario 3, using Nerdio and trimming further some of that excess, we're down to under $1,000 per month. That is a 59% savings, and the cost per user goes from $30 a month per that user down to $12.40 per month. A pretty significant savings, and more than enough to justify the $3 to $7 per month per user for Nerdio right there on the compute alone. But Josh, as we pointed out earlier, and I think you're going to talk to here, it's not just about the compute.
It is not, and this is the best. But wait, there's more to kind of follow up what you were just doing as a demonstration there, Ryan. So essentially, circling back to the initial conversation where it comes to there is more than just compute, right? Nerdio can bring to the table just-in-time provisioning that will give you some burst capacity and allow you to optimize even further. There's also 3-year reserved instance that you can use to offset some of the static cost of, say, VMs that would be on 24/7 just for a foundational footprint. OS disk auto scale is a huge win, essentially where it comes to taking a VM that's off that would be provisioned on a premium disk for a session host and flipping that over to a hard disk, immense savings right there. And then not only that, but you can do some OS disk shrinkage, and then also some compaction of your FS logics. So bringing all of that to the table, you can really, based on the math here on the screen, realize about an 83% savings over a completely unoptimized environment. So without further ado, I would like to hand it off to Greg for a demo.
Thank you. Let me get my screen up and let me know when you see it.
Perfect.
All right.
We are waiting for it here.
All right. So here we have your Azure tenant, and this is where Nerdio is going to get deployed. We're going to deploy 6 services into your Azure tenant: an app service, Key Vault, SQL, automation, log analytics, and app insights. From there, Nerdio will receive license utilization, and that's it. We have 0 access to your environment. Your data is your data. And from there, we'll utilize our Graph API to deploy into your subscriptions within your tenant. From that perspective, this is Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. We'll start here at desktop images and work our way through a number of the different items down the left. Starting out, you'll end up creating a desktop image, either from an existing virtual machine or from the Azure library. When that is deployed, that will be a very small virtual machine that you can certainly log into and customize. Once you're done customizing, simply log out, come back to Nerdio and power off and set as image. Here, we can offer you the ability to run any number of scripts that Nerdio provides, or scripts that you write and include with Nerdio to run yourself. The ability to add and remove applications via WinGet repositories. The ability to schedule this on a regular basis, as an example, one day after Patch Tuesday. And then we can put that into a compute gallery and push that out to multiple regions globally for your infrastructure, along with keeping the previous version as the image as a backup, as an option, and just simply save and close. This will, as of today, since today is Patch Tuesday for Microsoft, will run tomorrow. Once we have our desktop image completed and you need to update it again, you can simply log back in, make your changes, and create another image. We never sysprep this source, allowing you to never have to start over from scratch. Now that we have an image and got it scheduled for a new image every Patch Tuesday, we can deploy a new workspace. We can give this workspace a name and a friendly name, a description, and a location for your AVD metadata, as well as applying any tags that you would like as well. Simply select OK, and Nerdio will reach out and set up that workspace. Once that workspace is ready, we can select it and add a host pool to that workspace. Here we'll give a host pool name, a description, and then we'll look at the default configuration for this host pool. You have 4 different experiences to choose from multi-user, desktop, remote app, single user pooled, or single user personal. The ability to apply an AD configuration to this host pool. A configuration profile for your FS Logix configuration as well. We'll give these VMs a name. If we leave it with prefix, we'll add automatically a dash and 4 alphanumeric characters, or we can change that to pattern where it allows for alphanumeric or hashtags for numerical values. Select the network that you actually want these virtual machines to be deployed to, and select your desktop image. Any image that Nerdio is managing will be at the very top. Then you'll have the option to choose anything from the marketplace or at the very bottom, unmanaged images, including previous versions of the image that we're deploying now. Select any VM size that you would like, as well as the ability to administratively limit this list. And select your OS disk. Apply any tags that you would like, and simply select OK. Nerdio will reach out, set up the host pool, the application group, make any assignments that you have asked us to do, and then get it ready for auto scale configuration on the next screen. This takes a second or two, and it will shortly pop up here in a second. There we go. Now we have auto scale up at the top right that is turned off. By default, we'll go ahead and turn that on, change our virtual machine deployments from 5 to 3, and simply select save. As we are going through our auto scale piece, you'll notice that we are deploying 3 virtual machines directly into AVD as we speak. First thing that we do is when we turn a virtual machine off, we have the ability to change the OS disk. Changing the OS disk reduces your storage costs for the OS disk overnight. And then when we turn it back on, we convert that back to a premium SSD. This is instantaneous. It does not actually move any data. It's just a quality of service setting on the back end of the storage infrastructure within Azure. We also reuse host names and automatically re-image a used host after the last user has logged out. We'll define a host as one having an agent, what our base host pool capacity will be, how many VMs we will minimally keep running at any given time, and then if we run out of our base host pool capacity, we can burst beyond by defining how many virtual machines additionally you want to build. When these virtual machines are no longer needed, we physically remove them from the host pool capacity, so you're left with your primary capacity that you set it up with. We also have multiple triggers for auto scale to determine when things are turned on and turned off. We can auto scale based off CPU, memory, average active session, available sessions, or user driven. We can also combine 3 of those, CPU, memory, and average active session, to combine those. Then we have a schedule for when auto scale should run. It's either running 24 hours a day, or you define a schedule that works for you. Additionally, we have 3 levels of aggressiveness, high, medium, or low, when it looks to shut down a virtual machine. Typically, medium is what you'll use, which evaluates and it shuts down every virtual machine that has disconnected sessions only or no sessions whatsoever. When users are asked to log off, this will be the standard message that they get that you can certainly modify and how long they have. And our last option is auto heal broken host. We can take a look at the status of the agent and determine whether or not it's unavailable, SAS SXS stack listener not ready, domain trust, maybe the upgrade failed, and has no sessions, no active or even active sessions. If we see this for 10 minutes, we will restart the virtual machine. 10 minutes later, we'll evaluate it again. If we have to, we'll restart it, and then we will delete it and recreate it if need be to actually fix the issue. Once we're complete with auto scale, we'll save and close. And you'll notice here we are adding the 3 virtual machines, and you'll have the job details within it. Everything that we're doing, you'll have access to. Anything we send to Azure, receive from Azure, is logged within the task. Now that we have an image and a host pool and a schedule for the image, let's create a schedule for re-imaging the host pool. So we'll go to the host pool, host, resize, re-image, and we'll select the desktop image that we want to use. We can also bulk resize the VM or OS disks as well. We can set the number of virtual machines we want to do concurrently, as well as setting a schedule for not just one day after Patch Tuesday, but 3 days after Patch Tuesday. Now, when this schedule runs, Nerdio will automatically pick up the newest version of this image and deploy it to 3 VMs 3 days later. We also have some additional capabilities around cost reduction and management, allowing you to add a schedule for your RDP client updates, adding the virtual machines to all of your availability zones, enabling short path, time zone, as well as configuring additional scripts to run when the VM is created, started, stopped, or removed. We do have a nice feature to help you out in the event that your region is a little short on resources. In the event that this version of the VM is not available, you can manually select a different size or just simply select Use Intelligent Azure Capacity Extender, and that will automatically pick the next available VM that is as close as possible to the original. We also have a dashboard to give you user cost. When it's set up, completely set up, you'll have your monthly active user cost, your total AVD cost, list of your users that have logged in for the month, and how that cost breaks out, either proportionally, uniformly, or unallocated. We have also added level 1 support for Intune compliance and management. You can have Nerdio give you some basic information about your policies, if there's any that have failed or are not in compliancy, as well as the ability to minorly make some changes to the Intune infrastructure at a first level support organization. We also have our unified catalog, where you can search across all Winget repositories, select your favorites, create a deployment policy that allows you to install or uninstall applications to personal or pooled host pools, and the ability to schedule that on a regular basis. Scripted actions, you simply can add your own custom scripts down here at the bottom right. It's all PowerShell. You can certainly add that, and it will populate in every scripted action drop down within Nerdio. This also includes runbooks and the ability to group your scripts and run them in the order that you would like. We don't necessarily offer monitoring, but we do offer the ability to configure one of 3 monitoring solutions. The first would be AVD Insights. The next would be Control Up. And the third option would be Sapago, which provides you 3 menu items: user, host, and applications. We can configure your Azure Files Standard or Premium or Azure NetApp files and manage that as well. We can create additional RBAC roles, simply add a custom RBAC role and then assign it to a user. We do have 5 built-in ones, but the ability to create custom as well. All of our notifications, who to send them to and who they're coming from, and any conditions that you would like error messages on, as well as the ability to customize error messages or notifications as well. And last but not least, our AVD modeler, which is effectively an Azure pricing calculator for AVD. In this example, I have an example model that I've created where this is for 750 users, a total cost reduction of 67%, with a cost without Nerdio of $43,000, with Nerdio $14,000. And you can simply go through and add all your variables, get your cost output for the individual host pool, and see the details around how that was calculated. With that, I'll pass it back over. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, Greg, really much appreciated. And you could see just some of the real aspects of how you were both the parameters for scaling up, and then how aggressively you could scale down to really make an impact. And you showed it there on some of the finance pieces. So as well as just some of the granularity that the tool offers, and really managing to the next level your Azure Virtual Desktop environment. So really appreciate that.
Thanks, Greg. Great work.
Thank you.
I am going to bring my screen back up here.
And I will be around for the Q&A.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
Let's get this show back on the road here. So, Greg just showed really some of the awesome capabilities of Nerdio, and for us at Coretek, Nerdio is a no-brainer add-on and solution to AVD. We don't really do AVD without doing Nerdio as well because of the capabilities you see. And I think on top of it, that you should have all just seen with your eyes is that it's a very sensible, visual, and approachable management plane as well for all of your needs, and really bridges that gap that maybe some that were more classically trained with a GUI can really consume as well, and you can drive some great metrics out of it. You know, we talk about some of the things that we do here at Coretek. We are a Nerdio Platinum partner. That's one of the pieces that really makes us relevant in this space. We have 18 plus years of EUC experience, and ever since first WVD and now AVD, as you can see to the right, have been around. We at Coretek have been here. We were one of Microsoft's Lighthouse partners. We worked with their engineering team early on some of the functionality and feature that was initially ready, and did some of the space or the airlift campaign to really get this underway. And we, as a partner to Microsoft, really focus on Azure and security. So we're an Azure expert MSP, meaning that we understand the full depth and breadth of all the Azure services and how to make this solution work in a holistic Azure environment and do so in a secure fashion as an MSSP. Josh, do you maybe want to talk to some of the trends or the other things? I know we're doing just a ton around Nerdio and some automation and capabilities. What are some of the cool things that we're working on that we're bundling along with Nerdio to really provide that value to our customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of fitting this into a true IAC DSC model in most use cases. So infrastructure as code, desired state configuration model. We can really use Nerdio here as the orchestration platform for this service, which not only gives, as you saw through the demo, the support and the control plane from a Nerdio perspective, but we can really treat that environment with the same DevOps mentality, and with the scheduling of the OS upgrades and patching on Patch Tuesday. What we have seen success in is using some of the scripted actions at time of deployment to really enhance the environment by using that cadence to deploy, for example, a marketplace base image that has been patched when Microsoft updates the Azure Marketplace with the latest patched Windows image, and then it'll deploy, run these scripted actions to loop in what would be our desired state configuration, based on executing that with PowerShell and reaching into potentially any other ancillary services as an application provider you guys might have. It really takes that orchestration, puts it into Nerdio with the DevOps mindset, and you can completely treat your host pools as they're destructible at that point. If it's broken, just reprovision it, because it's going to come back out to the known desired state configuration that you essentially want in the first place. So that way, ultimately, the user experience is top tier, and it is exactly what you have architected to orchestrate and deliver to those end users to give them the ultimate experience in a VDI environment. And then we use some of those same principles to really enhance some of the self-healing capabilities, and really add on to what Nerdio is already doing, because Nerdio does the automated checks and everything from the Azure agent perspective, and then looping in something like an Ansible with drift detection is also kind of a no-brainer in that scenario, where you would be able to have all of the self-healing at your fingertips and bring your cost of management truly down as well. Not only the cost of orchestration and delivery, but management. And ultimately, because of where we're at in the market with Azure and how long we've been working with it, we integrate seamlessly into CAF WAF foundations, which is Cloud Adoption Framework, or well-adopted framework from the Microsoft perspective, which is essentially an enterprise scale landing zone within the Azure environment. So bolting those together and bringing it to you from a holistic perspective of treating Azure like a data center, planning it out to the T, and then deploying your VDI model within said governance policy framework of the Azure landing zone, and getting into a hub and spoke network topology, bringing in potentially a third-party NVA, we're able to ultimately secure that perimeter and provide access to these desktops anywhere that you would allow from a conditional access policy framework within your Azure Active Directory, and give a seamless experience to those end users. So if they're out for the day or over at grandma's house for visiting, and they need to jump on and get something done real quick on work, they're going to be coming in from a secure access point into your highly secure landing zone environment, and then leveraging the tools at their disposal for this VDI environment to be successful and them to do their job and handle any emergency that they may encounter.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. You know, I think I'm so excited about what we're doing now with like the IAC, and just how quickly we're able to not only leverage code to deploy, but then redeploy or deploy new. And we're constantly growing here at Coretek, and all the things we're doing around the Center of Excellence to assure that that capability grows for our customers is really exciting. So with that, I think we'll take some questions if there are any. And if I could, I'd like to maybe, Greg, you're still out there, correct?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Greg, just from your perspective, I would like to ask, you know, what are you seeing as well, especially around the attention that Nerdio is getting from some of the scaling pieces, or is from some of the cost modeling pieces? What are the talk tracks you're often having with your customers in that regard?
We're talking about all the different capabilities that Nerdio has, all the way from swapping the disks to having the appropriate auto scale configuration, not only across host pools with multi-session, but those host pools with personal, that we can do very, very much the similar thing, turning them on, turning them off as needed. But that, a lot of it comes back around figuring out what the right size is, and Nerdio helps you do that. And that's what we typically see with customers. They'll get it put in, evaluate it, look at the performance, and then ask questions about where the right place is to go and configure Nerdio, which is typically an adjustment to auto scale.
Awesome. I don't know if there's any other questions that have filtered in via the live stream there. Can't quite see it from where I'm at.
Nope, there are no questions currently.
Josh, did you see any questions come in?
Yeah, it looks like I have one about fitting the user experience into predictive cost models. So from that, and what Coretek generally does in that instance is leveraging, as we spoke about in the beginning, business personas and defining really the application use cases and putting that all together as part of the architectural framework to then go ahead and do cost analysis against, and really put together a holistic picture of what the environment's going to cost at that point.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I know that's something that we're engaged in on a daily basis. So That's great. Are there any other questions out there, or shall we wrap up and wish everybody a good afternoon?
I just published 2 questions to the chat. Are you able to see that?
I am. So this one, currently Nerdio doesn't support moving VMs between host pools. Is this feature on the roadmap?
Can you repeat the question for me one more time?
Yeah, it says currently Nerdio doesn't support moving VMs between host pools. Is this feature on the roadmap?
It's already there. It's been there for quite some time. So we can clone an entire host pool and move it. We don't necessarily move the current one, but we can clone it. And then you just deprovision the existing host pool. So when you clone it, it's everything that is, it's exactly the same. RDP properties, host pool properties, virtual machines, and images.
And then it looks like there's another follow-up question about unable to connect to their SCCM server console, even though they can ping it, can access the file shares.
So typically that is what we see from that is going to be some type of routing issue from the network that you're on. And we typically have customers that will install the SCCM agent on the desktop image and then run a script to uninstall it right before we create the image. But that's typically a DNS routing issue.
And I've seen similar in other scenarios, for example, leveraging that app for self-provisioned MSIX packages. And just depending on how you have DNS set up in your VNets, can really either enable all of that functionality or kind of mess it up. That old age adage of it's never DNS, oh, it was DNS, comes into play a lot in those types of scenarios. And then, as Greg said, routing, typical thing that we would like to validate from an end-to-end perspective to make sure that you can get to not only the VNet where Nerdio is hosted, but also where the session hosts are deployed and delivered.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Anyone else? Well, all right. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Hope you enjoyed this. I believe the recording will be available to share with any of your coworkers as you feel relevant. And once again, from ourselves at Coretek and from our partners at Nerdio, have a great afternoon and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.